living inside our heads, that usually means we're not aware that we're living inside our heads. Instead, all we're typically aware of is that life is hard and we're hurting. And more often than not, that means we focus our attention on figuring out what's causing the pain and how to make it stop. We tell ourselves that as long as we analyze hard enough and long enough, eventually we'll get to the bottom of things.
We tend to be able to solve our problems, many of our problems, through thinking and through problem solving and thinking abstractly and all these sorts of things. And as humans, those are qualities we value. They're what make us human.
We're endowed with this incredible capacity to form thought and to plan complex operations and to solve complex problems. So I think there's something instinctive about us when things are going wrong. My intuitive response is to think my way out of that hole.
And so we think and we think and we think, and there's no end to the thinking. Often, over time, this can wear us down and become a huge source of suffering. This phenomenon is called rumination, and it's a serious contributor to depression, anxiety, and other mental illness.
I was given to thinking, and I thought that I could kind of think my way out of the problems of my life, the emotional problems. And it wasn't until later on that I really got insight into how much anxiety the thought process itself was generating.
Dr. Seuss described this same habit in his classic psychological tome, How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
We are able to think our way out of a lot of our problems. But much of these things that I think are deeper for us, emotional, psychological suffering, we often can't think our way out of.
The term rumination, it's referring to this process by which we interpret and reinterpret and analyze and reanalyze and overanalyze. And it's the point at which this thought process, our ability to think, becomes pathological. In other words, it becomes the problem itself. Whatever the content was, whatever got us thinking in the first place, whatever problem we were responding to, that's now just over here, and it's still there. But what's really problematic is the fact that we cannot see past our negative thoughts. And these negative thoughts are starting to call up emotion, trigger emotion in our body like battery acid that's just wearing through us. And so if we can't work with the thought process itself, if we can't become aware of the fact that we're ruminating, that we're overthinking our problems, then we're actually creating a bigger problem than the one that started this problem. We don't realize it, but rumination, this process of thinking about our problems, it's actually a form of resistance to the problem itself. We're afraid to engage with the actual problem, just open up to it and see what's going on with it. And so we put up this barrier, we build up this wall of defense, and that thinking becomes a problem in and of itself. Whatever your primary problem was, that is now sidelined, and what's taking up the majority of your moment-to-moment experience is a lot of thinking itself. We're primarily involved now in our thought process, and we're not engaged, we're not interfaced with what was initially painful, what was initially causing a problem.
While thinking can help a situation then, it can also sometimes make things worse. Over time, we can literally sculpt and shape our brains into a corresponding physical funk.
As we think about the same thing over and over and over, we start to wear these grooves into our minds. The brain actually gets better at thinking a certain way because we do it so often.
When we move into a place of say, depressive rumination, this cycling. I call it a squirrel wheel, where the mind is just going over and over and over the same thing. It's like, I'll date myself, grooving a record. The needle is going deeper and deeper and deeper, and it sets up a habit, a conditioned response, so that if somebody says A, the person responds with that habituated, conditioned, automatic pilot kind of response.
We have habitual ways of reacting to stress. If you think about all the ways in which you react, it's habitual. And the more we do it, the more it becomes a deeper groove in the brain. So when something like anxiety, for example, is triggered, it's much easier to go down that well-worn reactive path than to do something differently that wouldn't necessarily be that, that maladaptive coping, strategy, the path that you've always walked down. And sometimes with anxiety, I would think my brain things feel scrambled, like I can't make sense of things because I'm just so worked up, so anxious.
When we get into this kind of brain funk, something interesting happens. All of life, the full extent of experience, becomes reduced to something else, namely, just what we're thinking about.
We focus too narrowly on our approach. We focus just on how can I think my way out of this problem? And in that process, a lot of times we wake up old habitual cycles, and then we start to project about, what I can do about it in the future. And we're completely out of the moment.
One of the qualities of mood disorders, anxiety and depression, are that attention becomes distorted. It's one of the symptoms of a diagnosis is impaired concentration or attention. And in depression, attention tends to be backward focused. It's past oriented. The person who's depressed is thinking all the things they should have done. There's a lot of guilt, self-blame, replaying of past experiences. And in anxiety, it's very future oriented, what we call what-ifing and catastrophizing. What if this happens? What if that happens? And it creates a lot of anxiety in the present.
Our problem-solving skill is significantly narrowed when we just look at it from I got to think my way out of this. I got to fix it, What we're leaving out of it is how our intuition, how our bodies, how our hearts can also inform us and help us to seek the kind of help that we need. And even if you look at a mood, like say you're walking along and you know how a mood comes over you and you feel, your focus narrows on that mood. And meanwhile, it's a lovely fall day, you don't see the colors, you don't feel the air on your skin, you don't even notice the birds or your neighbor who tried to wave at you, but you were too, caught up in your problem.
Wouldn't it be nice to learn how to step away from that cycle and even find some peace? The message of this lesson is that analyzing and overanalyzing may not be the best strategy to get there. The message of the next lesson is simply, there's another way.